Hey, muy buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. And as always, muchísimas gracias to everyone for your guys' words, prayers, and for your amazing support. De corazón se los agradezco. And before I get into the story on him, muchísimas gracias also for the live tonight. It's always something real refreshing for myself, at least. And for that, I thank everybody that gives me a minute. But today, I want to touch it's a newer topic, right? So I'm going to try to stay clear from the date, right? For obvious reasons. But I've been asked many a times, as at this moment, who do I think is one of the most dirtiest Billies out there, right? And at the time you asked me that question, I could think of a few, but when it comes to pinpointing the dirtiest, something to sit back and think real good on, right? But anyways, just gonna circle around D for Fontana. In my personal opinion, if he ain't the dirtiest, he's sure up there, right? For just the way he punks camaradas. He presses on them. And even when they're from a city, right? His homeboys, now I know these from Fontana, he's a Pili hood. I'm still wet behind my ears when it comes to neighborhoods, right? But nevertheless, this gonna circle around a camarada they call Chief from Hard Times, Fontana. He had another Celi from Verdugo, and this is after the shoe kick out. After they got to Salinas, right? And as you guys heard the stories about him, he has his crew literally stand outside every try, and it ain't about the kitty no more. It's about going under his bunk for himself, right? And has no shame in it. I know even though a lot of people think that I don't conversate with whatever, right? Just why I consider him to be a dirty vato, right? It's because now, even on lockdown, he's not touching his heart, right? Still going around and requesting camaradas to kick down to him, even though a lot of them, as I heard and know, they're not being able to go to canteen. But I guess that's none of his concern, right? His concern is filling his stomach and getting food between his teeth, right? But anyways, a little before the lockdown, right? The homie Chief and this other camaradas from Verdugo, they were out there. They were hitting, you know, and of course, for them to stay on the 180, hitting here and there, they had to show their proper respects, right? That goes without saying, and me personally, when there's a proper Pili there, he's not only doing it for the kitty, but for other reasons as a Ramfla that I consider them to be a good thing, right? But when that's out the window and you start seeing an individual that is just for his benefit, to slam, and he always gets his share and gets allowed to put it out there first, but he still circles around and, you know, instead of giving you just the green, like, yeah, just do with, I got my issue out, right? Go ahead and you boogie and get yours. Now it comes always with a request that quiero más, right? I want more. And that goes beyond a respect thing, right? That's somebody that looks down and let's call it what it is, it's punking somebody, and it's just part of the new causa, right? Which is allowing these individuals to be that much or think they are that much in power of a camarada, right? Or they can't go there with them. But anyways, one, two time I heard, there was a young homie that he actually already paroled from Salinas, right? But was there and he told me himself, one, two times it was cool with Chief and the homie from Verdugo, but after a while, they weren't able to get their money backs, and the Billy was still on the yard high, right? That's to the closest camaradas that were around him, right? So they started feeling some way. And for those that know, should know, even if you're Sureño, you should be allowed to ask for your respect, right? If you're doing things correctly. Oh, I won't advise it now, right? Because that's out the window. Now you can't touch on anything they do without them taking your career. It's always been like that, but it's more so now. But anyways, they denied him one, two times. The homie said they needed to get their money back to keep it going, right? It was so with respect, um, which should have been understood, right? I mean, if you really look at him any differently, smart in the bitch should be like, okay, I could press on these dudes to get rid of their stuff and no more comes in, or I could chill and keep getting high, right? Which is a smart thing. But nah, you see, that's the difference between a tecato and a dolphin, right? So he didn't want to hear it, all that. You're a homie from the town, and as you guys are aware, that has no meaning. That's just a myth that vatos that quote unquote always try to lie to the homies that haven't been there, done that. Is, yeah, we got a pili there, from the town or from the hood or just the area period, right? When they should be like, hey, that's out the window. They should be real with things, right? Because really don't care about that. They just keep it a buck. They don't care if you're out of state, up north, down south. It don't matter. They care what you can bring to the table, right? Which, if you think about it, it's understood to a point. At the end of the day, the question is, when do we start or stop thinking of ourselves as man, as prisoners too, and become a young bato, start eyed by a señor, by a veterano. That should be out the window. I mean, there's just so much out there that things should be a lot clearer, right? But things seem to be spiraling worse. But without getting into out of topic, excuse me. At first I heard the Billy said feedments, right? So, and the next time the homies hit, of course, whatever they hit, they hit a pedazo, they broke him off with his third. And as you know, you have to sit back, allow him to go ahead and do his thing till he gives you luz verde to, and then you're able to go ahead and do your thing. Well, since the homies were showing him love, he separated whatever his third was, and he separated some to make some feria, right? And the ones he separated, he actually ordered his food workers, right? I call them Talibanes, but it was camaradas, um, to go ahead and sell nothing but papers. And he wanted 5 papers per quarter, instead of just making the extra 50 bucks, Again, he's not doing it to be fair with people. He's doing it to come up on people, because if you're a good businessman inside, you'd rather sell 4 fat papers and then come back to you than give him some skimpy stuff and they start, in this case, they were not going to talk about the camarada, rather the Billy of who he is. But, there is conversation amongst camaradas, of course, respectfully, because there is those camaradas that you speak ill about a Billy and you buck up and you take care of it on the spot. Tell you, because I was that one, right? But you start advising people, right, with respect, like allow the Billy to get his workout right after him. Same material, just fatter papers, right? And there is the catos, camaradas, whatever, that they're smarter than to, go down that spiral of addiction because they know what it's going to lead to, right? So time came, the home started putting out their thing. They were selling grams, papers, nothing the same, right? But since it was their material, they didn't have to answer for it. But nevertheless, the requested chief to go and speak to him and basically just requested to know, one of his workers had bought some papers and spend less money, more holiday, just leave it like that. And he was basically upset. See, it was payback. See, a tecato or a dolphin's gonna always, you deny me jale firmes. I can't obligate you, which he can, but, I guess it's too obvious, right? You never know how that mind works, right? But nevertheless, I'm gonna find something to press on you. So it became, why are you making me look bad? And basically it was, this is how I'm selling, this is how you're gonna get rid of them, or we're gonna stop this period. And to be sincere, the Kamala chief should have been straight and forward there too, and be like, I want to stop this because I know where it's gonna lead. But greed is something that gets a hold of you, and even if you don't use that money, feels good to put in your locker, right? But when it ain't like the streets, that's where the misled comes in for the young ones on the street. At least where I grew up, it's always been about earning yours. You guys get it. I want to go sell it in this section. I'm gonna boot up, suit up, strap up, and earn that, right? Ain't nobody gonna tell me how to do things here. In prison, it ain't nothing like that. You could be wanting to make money, but you gotta remember we're following Aptecato's rules and regulations. So you're never gonna win. Just off the back. You're lucky if you run across a Billy that wants a third, because now they bumped it up to half. Just think about it. When I was there, a pedazo wasn't 36 grams. We were thinking 38. And even then, you divided that and gave a third away. You're still able to make your feria, but of course, his tongue, So imagine now where they want half off the gate and you're gonna put the money for the next batch and you're gonna just be kicking me off out of respect, to say it nice, right? So that's off the bat. So now imagine them putting all these roadblocks for you to make feria. Because their end goal is they're not gonna get away with you, so they're gonna politic against you. And let's be sincere. You could be a guy beat around the bush that knows how things move, right? But you run across a guy that's beat around the bush, but that's a dope thing. You're never gonna reach to his imagination of doing things. It's just fact. You know, just to tell a little backstory, I've been in this, well, at least in the dope thing, that's on my family since I remember as a kid, right? Talking about literally prices wise, material wise, XXX, whatever, routes, whatever. Total was not a dope thing. And when I sat and conversed with him on these things, he outbeat me by far. As I met other Billies that had a lot more mindset to seeing things and I thought I knew. And it's just the way this goes. They're so good at washing up, especially camaradas, that your best bet is, now I'm not gonna say it like that, but in Chief's situation, that's his older homie, so he had it coming. One. Two, you're on his yard. So he should have known by him saying no. His reaction would have been, I'll get rid of everything and not do no more, period. You know? But it didn't work like that. So, of course, He felt it wasn't right, so he kept selling or making four papers out of a quarter instead of five. That way, the order him to. You see, it wasn't just good enough for him to get down with what he felt he had coming just for being a Billy, right? But now he was gonna tell him how to get rid of his own stuff. And no more, I'm gonna make it a pause now. We're bringing it from Fontana, you're gonna keep it going. So a favor becomes an obligation, as in everything else, not just dope. I mean, if we sit down and think, a lot of people disagree of how the 187s are happening now inside. You know, I see things a good thing because it will bring a lot more awareness a lot quicker, at least when it comes to camaradas, norteños, on things. Things ain't right. However, we tend to picture or deny them or lie to ourselves. If we go back and just analyze, me personally, I give a lot of respect to Maravilla, to them battles that at one point said, how are we going to be risking our skin and be killing you just because of who you are? But that didn't only fall through. Now they dictate who's running your neighborhood, what you're selling in your neighborhood, how everything gets done in your neighborhood. I mean, that's punto y aparte of them being who they being and not showing their respects, right? One thing is you as your neighborhood throw a meeting and, hey, let's send something up out of respect from our hood, of them dictating who's gonna come in and tell who, what, and what goes up, what doesn't, what you do, what you don't do. And he's from a complete different area. I understand we're all campoleros, but neighborhood is neighborhood. Game banging is game banging, right? But since that got permitted, look to where it jumped off. But nevertheless, Gloria took it for a long ride. At the end, Chief wanted to stop, and he was advised by his homie from Verdugo not to. He didn't have a need to stop, and he didn't take the homie from Verdugo's advice. And unfortunately, there's camaradas that are snakes too, right? Homie from Verdugo went out there and he read it. Went to D and told on Chief because he was afraid, just keeping it real. And Chief, he got hit, moved, and he was done, at least in a good yard, right? And it just goes to show, sometimes we're set. Well, we tend to do things out of instinct. For example, Chief was Indian. He was getting a check. He didn't have to do all that extra stuff. It's why I always say, you could go in, present yourself as a sureño campolero, but do your program, pay your respects, hooping as a round flag. You could call down like I tell all my homies that I talk to her and the sister. If you get called on, dispuesto, vámonos. ¿Quién es? ¿Para cuándo? That simple. But if you don't, don't be that extra super sureño, right? Believe me, I learned the hard way. So just be smart. As I always say, analyze things for what they are. I remember as a kid, it was all fun and games, being on the street, throwing canicas in the corners, making money. And then once you go inside for you to make some canteen for your pad, it comes with a whole bunch of rules and regulations that, believe me, most of the older vatos getting out, they're not giving clutch on. So analyze everybody and everything that's always said. As I always said, or my advice to everyone is don't trust nobody. And that includes myself. If you hear things that come out my mouth that don't make no sense, you know, just do exactly that, to me. But do it to everybody in general. Pick up what you think feels right. Because that's one thing, trusting yourself, trusting your loved ones. Please stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones. Muy buenas noches.